Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the Finout webinar about the FinOps KPI with fabulous Dieter. We have a couple of more minutes until everybody join in. Feel free to write in the chat if you have any questions before we start, or just say hi. I'll do that for everybody to feel comfortable and break the ice. Hi. Maybe even add an emoji. So feel free to write something as well. That's about it for now. We're going to start in 3 minutes. How are you, Kartik? Am I saying it correct?
Kartik, yep.
Kartik. Fantastic.
Yeah, and if you guys have questions, please post them in chat. We're going to monitor chat and then answer the questions as we get along.
Yeah, I think Yoav can interrupt Dieter and I and jump in with anything that he's seeing that we can help answer.
I'll try to stop your heated discussion. Guys. Okay, so that. Hey, Rupa, how are you?
Hey, Rupa. Yoav, is this event live on LinkedIn as well?
No, we are doing it just for people that are registered. I didn't want to do it live because it's exclusive. If you paid attention and you registered, they want to come in.
It's very exclusive, yeah.
Yeah, for people that really knows their stuff. I want them to ask a poignant question. Once you do it in LinkedIn, it's everyone's game. But we are recording this session and we'll upload it later. So don't worry, you'll be able to watch it if you want it. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Patrick, Alan.
How are you?
Again, if you guys have questions during the webinar, please type them in chat and we're going to answer them as they come up. Hey, oh, Michelle is here. Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
Who's the mysterious Michelle? Come on.
She's a FinOps ambassador.
Ah, from the foundation itself.
Yeah.
Happy to have you, Michelle. Okay, I'm giving it 1 more minute, and we're starting until...
Okay, sounds good. How many people are on the webinar?
At this moment, we got 28 people connected, and we have registered around 110, which is usually on par. Usually it's around the fourth or third.
Yeah.
Goes up a little bit, and now we're at 30. By the way, I hope everybody, we're going to see some of you at the FinOps X in 2 months. We're going to get we're working on some very cool stuff that I'm not going to share with you here. You need to come and see. But naturally, new sticker.
Starting out with a teaser, strong. I like it. Usually people close on a teaser.
That's the idea, keeping everybody guessing, So, okay, I'm going to start. Hey, everybody. Now we're starting officially. I'm Yoav, Finout's marketing VP. With us, we have Ifat, our senior marketing manager from the team. But the stars here of the event are Dieter. We're going to share a little bit about his background in the next slide. And Max, we're going to talk today about FinOps KPIs, every stage of the maturity level. Max, can you please switch the slide? Thank you. So 1 word about the fabulous speakers. On the right, you have Maksim, Finout's leading sales engineer. Worked at Datorama, then in Salesforce. Now he's crushing it at Finout, and he talked to everybody from tiny startups to massive enterprises. He's seen it all, and he answered every FinOps KPI questions about the platform that is available. A huge source of knowledge to the company. And on the left, if you thought that was impressive, we got Dieter that been there from day one, Cloud FinOps since 2013. Google, Netflix, Intuit, Roku. I don't think I need to add any more. The names say themselves. So, and he lectured about KPIs before any of us knew what FinOps is. So I'm not gonna say anymore. As we've mentioned before, to the new people, you can feel free to write questions on the chat. We would love to answer them. We'll monitor them. This lecture is recorded and will be uploaded as a on-demand webinar. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time, and we'll try to be precise. That's why I'm going to give the stage to Max. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Yoav, and I appreciate that introduction. I will say I'll make a minor correction that I've seen it most, not all. There's always new things to learn and uncover in the quickly evolving world of FinOps. But in terms of what Dieter and I wanted to chat about today is really thinking about what the role of KPIs are in achieving a scalable FinOps practice. Right, making sure that we can think about identifying the appropriate KPIs, and to be a little bit more specific about that, even kind of prescriptively recommending some KPIs based on the FinOps practice's maturity level, wherever it is that you happen to be joining us from, right? And so with that, obviously, Dieter, you've been at some storied enterprises. You've been working in FinOps before anybody even had an inkling that FinOps would be the name of this industry, right? I'd love for you to maybe give us an idea of what is the role of KPIs as people progress through their FinOps journey.
Yes, of course. I mean, in a nutshell, if you don't measure it, right, you can't improve, and you don't know how you're doing. So you want to introduce KPIs as quickly as possible, as it's doable in your FinOps practice. And it depends, as you mentioned, on the maturity level, right? If you are just getting started, maybe do something simple first, right? And we're going to go into details on how that will look like. And then take it from there, right? Expand your KPI journey to business KPIs, right? Something like cost per tax return or something like that, cost per streaming hour. But first and foremost, you need the data because you want the data to drive your decisions, right? If an engineer introduces a new feature and that feature is very expensive, right? Some KPI will go up, right? And it will provide visibility to leadership. And you can also use the KPIs as a forcing function. That's what we are doing at Roku, that we have a mandate to keep the cost per streaming hour the same. Now, our cloud spend is still going to increase, and we're going to touch on how that looks like, right? As we have more active users. But the cost per streaming hour, you can sort of ask the engineers to self-fund that. If they want a new feature that introduces more cost, they can offset it by an optimization, right? So these are all the things that are coming together here. And it is a continuous journey, right? J.R. Stormont today in the FinOps Summit this morning mentioned that it's not like an end to FinOps, right? I sort of see it as an industrial kitchen where there's multiple cooks and you need to clean up every day. Otherwise, it will get too messy.
Yeah. No, I love that analogy. That's really great. The mise en place, right? Consistent cleaning as you go. One thing that you said just now that was very interesting from my perspective is driving accountability by using KPIs, right? And having sort of metric that some of the engineers at Roku are beholden to. I think that's a really, really great point that I'd love to highlight and would love your feedback on. A lot of times when you speak with some folks that are just gaining visibility into their cloud costs, they're thinking about it from the perspective of, well, I need to make sure that I'm monitoring my spend, right? And there's this concentration on spend very frequently, without the tying it to what that spend is actually driving at the end of the day, right? It's not spend that's being spent for the fun of it, hopefully. So kind of how do you think about when folks should start thinking about looking at metrics beyond spend?
Absolutely, from the very beginning, right? You touched on a couple of things. FinOps is not about reducing cloud spend as much as possible, because then no one would be able to get anything done. No customers will be served, right? FinOps is about getting the most out of every dollar spent, right? And that's a fundamental principle that we don't want to be wasteful, right? We want to be mindful of our spend. And this is where accountability comes in. With moving from a data center to the cloud, the spend model changes, right? Because from a data center, procurement is done by someone else, not the engineers, right? And the procurement process is also relatively slow, right? You need to send an order form, get the bill of materials, then that stuff needs to be built, packaged, and shipped, right? Then it needs to be unpackaged and put into racks, right? The entire process is months at best, right? While in the cloud, you are able to just turn something on as needed. And there are workloads, when it comes to doing like science and research, like protein folding, where 150,000 cores or 400,000 cores were turned on for a very short time period, right? So because of that procurement model being different in the cloud, we need the engineers to take ownership of the workloads, right? So it's no longer like in the data center where you have the developers, right, and they're just throwing things over the fence, and then the site reliability engineers, they need to figure out how to make it work. In the cloud, the developers typically are responsible end to end, right, from the ideation to the proof of concept, to productionalizing a workload, right, and then maintaining that workload in a production environment, which isn't easy either, right, because there's feature requests, there's bugs, there's refactoring, there's a lot of different activities that are happening after a workload is in production, right, and the engineers, we need them to be accountable because there's only one Dieter. And at Roku, there's 2,500 engineers. So there's a lot of them, right? They can come and ask questions. And that's what my daily life looks like, right? I get sometimes easy questions, but sometimes really bizarre questions, right? That are founded in some business use case, right? And then it's interesting in my role to figure out those things, right?
That's great. And thank you for reminding me of the good old days of procurement of Sun servers with specific CPU and RAM. But I did kind of set you up with that question for talking about how do you think about looking at different types of KPIs based on maturity, right? I know you've obviously worked at some very large organizations that maybe back in at the very beginning of what kind of FinOps evolved into had really low maturity, and then you've seen that progress through that walk and run stage. And I'd love to get your insight on sort of how you've seen the types of KPIs that people track evolve, and what kind of insights they use that different types of metrics for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, get started with whatever you have, whatever you can, right? It's better to have something and track it over time, to have some kind of visibility than to wait until you have the perfect KPI, right? So typically, you can get started fairly easily with technical KPIs, and we will touch on that later. Things like cost per vCPU hour or cost per gigabyte stored, right? And these things should trend down over time as the engineers are using cheaper options in the cloud for compute and storage, right? Then as you mature, you will see that more automation will be introduced into that process, right? For example, in the beginning, you may ask your cloud provider, hey, give me a graph for a cost per vCPU hour, right? And they will give you like 6 months or 12 months or something like that, right? And then every month you may ask them to provide you an updated graph, right? And then as you introduce automation, you will likely reach out to whoever built this thing. Hey, can you share your Athena query or whatever you are doing, BigQuery behind the scenes, right? And you will try to build that in-house, so that you don't get that on a monthly basis, right? But now your cadence will increase, and will maybe you get it on a daily, on an hourly basis, or in near real time. And that is what I'm seeing as you progress from crawl, walk to run. That then at the run stage, once you have that automation, you have the access to the different data silos, right? That allow you to build those KPIs, where business KPIs will be introduced. Things like cost per ticket sold, cost per tax return, cost per streaming hour, right? And with that maturity, and with that automation comes the maturity, and then you will see that a shift possibly from the technical KPIs to the business KPIs.
Yeah, and I think I'd love to just drive home. You've mentioned cost per streaming hour a couple of times, and I think it really illustrates why KPIs are so powerful. And it's because if there's an episode that's being dropped on a particular streaming service today, right? And it's for a show that a large portion of the populace is watching, of course you're going to see a massive spike in cloud costs, right? But as long as it's driving a commensurate output, right, that is driving your business forward, that is driving revenue for your business, it's expected, it's desirable, right? It's what you would hope to have happen. So yeah, really, really aligned with you on that one. That makes a ton of sense. So I know you've mentioned the cost per vCPU hours a couple of times now. I'd love you to maybe share with us how you think about some of those starting KPIs and what is it that it can garner in terms of usefulness for some of these engineering orgs and companies at large.
Yeah, so the cost per vCPU hour is simply the number of dollars spent on compute divided by the vCPUs in each hour, right? So it is a relatively simple calculation. Now you do need visibility into your vCPUs. You can either do that by calculating it manually, right? By having a table of all the different instance types, right? And how many vCPUs they have. That should also expand into spot or preemptible compute, right? Because that is good that the engineers are using these compute options, right? But in the beginning, it's just going to be, you have the KPI, there it is, right? And now you can observe it over time. The first thing that you will see that you end up doing is you sort of build a cost per vCPU hour by engineering leader. So you want to tie that again to ownership, right? To make sure that, okay, you have Bob and his cost per vCPU hour is 10 cents, and then you have Bill, his cost per vCPU hour is 7 cents. What does Bill do that Bob doesn't do, right? So that is how you get started with that, right?
Now, are you looking at those as a wall of shame or a leaderboard? Like, what's typically the way you've seen organizations?
I prefer leaderboard. Yeah. But it basically provides you with a focus areas of where you want to go and start looking and having conversations with people, right? Because maybe Bob and Bill are still okay, but there is someone else, right? Like Marion that is having 20 cents per vCPU hours, right? And then when you go and talk to Marion, you find out that she actually is working on large language models or some AI applications, right? And that is necessary for their business, right? And as you measure and attribute these KPIs to the engineering leaders, right, you will see that it's not necessarily, I mean, it could be the leader or the engineers being wasteful, right? But you will see that certain types of applications are just more expensive, right? For example, a TurboTax, running a TurboTax is relatively cheaper compared to a QuickBooks, right? Because QuickBooks is this huge ERP suite, right? Where you have like different currencies, different tax rates, and any small business can use that to invoice their customers. My accountant uses QuickBooks, right? And so it is, by nature, it is a little bit more expensive to build those types of applications and maintain those types of applications, right? But over time, what you should see is a trend down, right? And we saw that in the previous graph, that there is like maybe an up and down happening, right? But over large time periods like 12 months, 24 months, right, you should see a trend down as engineers make choices of cheaper compute or cheaper storage.
And this is also where you'll see the benefits of things like rate optimization, probably. So yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. And so I guess as we go further on the maturity curve and we get to sort of the walk stage, there's a metric that you recommended we chat about, right? This cost per gigabyte stored. I'm curious if you could help me understand, the fine difference between things like, cost per VCU hour versus cost per gigabyte stored, because on the surface they both seem like usage metrics tied to cost, one divided by the other, giving you an idea of what rate you're paying for this. So if you could help understand the difference there and why you think that this is a slightly more advanced way of looking at some of your cloud costs.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. On the surface, it's just a simple, back of the napkin calculation. But when it comes to storage, you need to remember that there are different storage types, right? There are life cycle rules that you can employ to go to cheaper storage options, more colder storage options, right? Mm-hmm. And something that we do at Roku that resulted in phenomenal savings is that we actually not just encrypt at rest, but we also compress at rest. Mm-hmm. So whenever you want to access data, you need to rehydrate it, right? And do your calculation, and then you either drop it on the floor, or when you have to save results of your query, right? That is also always encrypted, of course, but it's also compressed at rest, right? So there is a lot of different techniques that you can use. You can't compress CPUs, right? That would be interesting. But storage you can compress, and the way storage is built depends also on the cloud provider. For example, on Amazon Web Services, let's say that you have 50 gigabytes for 24 hours, and then you delete them for 24 hours, and then you have again 50 gigabytes for 24 hours. What actually happens behind the scenes, right? So you have 50, 0, 50, 0, 50, 0. Behind the scenes, you will just get billed for 25 gigabytes, right? And so the calculation is a little bit different and a little bit more complex. When you look at the actual Athena query, it is quite a monster. And so to be able to get your cost per gigabyte stored, right? In this graph, what you see here is here's actually the percentage of the most expensive storage being utilized. And you see it was almost 100% in 2020. And then by 2023, we got it down to like 40% or something like that, right? And it was much easier for me to graph rather than actually calculate the cost per gigabyte stored. So this is an artifact of how complex that calculation is.
Yeah, and I also love that you're sharing with us a bit of insight into just how much of a journey this process is, right? This is not looking at months or weeks or even quarters. This is over the course of 4 years that you've gotten
Yes.
to this place. So, really appreciate that insight. And I guess, can you give us a little bit of what sort of things you were able to do with these types of unit economics that you weren't with the ones that were a little bit further upstream, right? Things like those vCPU hours.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we actually discovered is engineers were deeply afraid of deleting an object in object storage, right? Because it could be some configuration file for some service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the cloud providers also make it really easy to go to colder and cheaper storage options, but then it also becomes exponentially more challenging to unravel the cold storage and decide which portions of that can be deleted or are no longer required, can be further archived, and those kind of things, right? So having a lens on the cost per gigabyte stored provided us with the ability to then go again by engineering leader and have these conversations. Okay, so Bill, you're doing really well, but Bob is having a little bit of a problem. He has all this craft lying around, and so it turns out Bob is maybe IoT devices, right? There is security cameras that have a video feed where they record, 6 seconds or something like that, and he was storing the stuff for like 12 months, right? And
Right.
that wasn't practical because a year from now, no one is going to look at the cat walking by your front door. It allowed us to have these conversations with the engineering leaders and then go and do these optimizations in a targeted fashion, right? And again, without having this visibility, right, without being able to provide focus into this area, we would have never tackled this storage situation.
That's great. Yeah. Well, maybe you'll want to upload that video to social media, show people that a cat did indeed walk by your door. But certainly not going to drive a business forward. So makes a ton of sense. And with that, I appreciate your take on that. With that, I think we're getting to the point that a lot of people are currently very curious about. I'm having a lot of conversations about this personally with the folks that I speak to on a daily basis. Some of those business KPIs, right? This is where people really start looking at how do the things that their business, strictly speaking, generates for revenue, for profit, how do they relate to the expenditure within the cloud that's being used to either generate that or somehow help generate that. So, here you gave an example of streaming hours, but you're also giving a couple of some easier things that some folks can start using probably more or less immediately. So would love to get your take on how you think about which direction to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, business KPIs is a little bit more challenging because you can't just run a query on your cloud billing data and surface these insights, right? You have to track somewhere these how many tax forms were filled out by day, right, or by hour. How many QuickBooks customers do you have? How many tickets did you sell? If you have like a Ticketmaster or some service like that, right? Or in our case, the cost per streaming hour, so you need the streaming hours, right? And these business KPIs are typically not tracked on an hourly basis, right? This is someone having a spreadsheet somewhere, right? It is in the beginning, definitely it is a very manual process, right? It is subject to restating data, right? So maybe the month of January, you have more insights and you need to update these numbers, right, to get the full picture. So these business KPIs, one of the challenges here is that you have to aim to automate the business portion of that KPI, right? And for us, the streaming hours was relatively easy to automate, right? For tax returns, right? It was also relatively easy because that is sort of like a multi-hour process where someone does their tax return. But then other KPIs like, how many active QuickBooks users do you have, right? By the hour or by the day. And you will notice that maybe at the end of the month when the business is preparing for their taxes, right? There's a spike there of usage, right? So these business KPIs typically need to be automated, and you need to find ways of tackling that so that you can get something that is near real time, right? If spreadsheets are not going to get you there, you have to find a way to collect whatever is done manually can be automated, right? So you have to find ways of how to automate that, and that automation process may need some manual input occasionally, right? If something has to be corrected, if something has to be restated, you can do that. And if you have challenges of finding the perfect business KPI for you, you can always track cloud cost per revenue, right? So you have $10 million in cloud spend, and you have hopefully more in revenue, right? Let's say $20 billion, right? So you have 50 cents. And so a good percentage here to target is 4.5%. You're spending 4.5% of your revenue on cloud. That is sort of like a ballpark figure.
What's really interesting to me is that this is where you actually say for the technology needed. That's where an advanced FinOps platform is necessary, because in my experience, this is also the first metric in the maturity curve where sort of access control becomes very significant. Some of these numbers are pretty sensitive, right? Number of streaming hours, number of daily active users, things like that, that not everybody should have access to. But knowing that we're nearing the end of the conversation, I just wanted to kind of put up a slide summarizing some of what we just talked about. Dieter, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing all your depth and wealth of knowledge with all of us. Always a pleasure chatting with you from a personal perspective. So thank you for that as well. Yoav, do we have any questions?
There is one. Yes, there is an interesting question here. Max, do you want to read it out loud? Can you open the chat on the right?
I
see there is questions. Wait a minute, what's this?
I can read it
on the chat and on the question.
Yeah, I can read it and answer it.
Sure, Dieter, you do it.
All right, with new cloud services, there are container or capacity-based, like Microsoft Fabric, where you purchase a capacity and the cost for all compute is fixed, with only the storage being dynamic. Should we be looking at percent of capacity being consumed by specific workloads or workspaces? I'm curious how KPIs and metric monitoring is evolving and changing with different pricing models where capacity pricing is fixed price. So my first reaction to that is you should, if you have a hammer, use the hammer. So if you have cost per vCPU hour, right,
that's a good tip.
Use that, right? And it's okay, because as engineers use these different type of technologies, right, that will impact their cost per vCPU hour or their cost per gigabyte stored, right? And if that service has sort of like a fixed cost, well, maybe that is a way for the engineer to optimize their compute cost, right? Is thinkable. Or there are things within that service that you can further optimize by adjusting your capacity needs, right? Now, if you have such a service that, as you described, Brian, you should go and look at the utilization. It's like a SaaS product, right? It's like a PagerDuty subscription or a Datadog subscription, right? You get certain units, right, that you subscribe. Let's say you get like 10,000 Datadog, I don't know, Datadog units, right? So what happens is, how many of those units are you using, right? So in a sense, it becomes, and the same is true for containers and other things, right? But in a sense, it becomes one of those software subscriptions that you now need to break out and monitor again. The way you are used with SaaS licenses and those kind of things. And then it becomes, are you over or under, right? And what happens if you are over? Do you get are you paying public pricing or list pricing, or are you paying discounted pricing? And if you're under, are you getting your money back? Probably not. Or can you roll this over into the next contract, right? So those things become important. Next question. And how much time do we have, Yoav? Do we have under
Fine.
45
For questions, people naturally can stay as much as they want, but we have 10 minutes roughly.
10 minutes. Got
so
it.
It's fine.
Got it. So here's a question by Veronica. Do you use specific tools for monitoring the KPIs? I started by asking the cloud provider to give me the KPIs. Now that cadence was monthly. So, at the end of the month, there's nothing that you can do other than being sad, right? Or my cost per vCPU hour went up, right? And then, I asked them, well, how do you create that KPI, right? And the guy had, I have an Athena query. And I'm like, excellent. Can you share that Athena query with me, right? And this is how you build it out. And then you can either use QuickSight, or you can use, Looker, Tableau, or any of those other BI tools. Then Patrick is asking a
question. Wait a
minute,
Dieter, Max, can you please share maybe very shortly some ways Finout is being used to measure FinOps KPIs? Because it is part of the deal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, of course. Our customers are consistently looking at how they can ensure that they're looking at efficiency rather than volume metrics like spend. And so, of course, we have a standardized process for onboarding those KPIs. Generally, this is something that lives in, for lack of a better term, a database table somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Dieter, you mentioned Athena. Sometimes people have, an Excel spreadsheet with this. Fingers crossed it's something a little bit more robust than that. But not always, and it's totally fine, right? We meet people where they are, not not aspirationally. So we'll obviously onboard that data from where it sits. We'll figure out a way to pull that into our application on a daily cadence, and then we'll visualize it against whatever portion of cloud spend it's relevant to, because I think oftentimes people just take the totality of their cloud spend, divide that into some of their KPIs, and forget about the fact that there's a ton of cloud spend being used for just keeping the lights on applications, right? Applications that have nothing to do with generating that business output. And so really being able to figure out what portion of the spend is, part of that COGS, or however it is that you want to split it out, that's what will get you a really good insight into your unit economics, rather than obfuscated with spend that's not really relevant for generating those KPIs.
Very good. Very good. Should we take a couple more questions? We have here
the Patrick questions.
Shireen.
Yeah, Shireen.
Yeah, so, Shireen, I'm one of the FinOps ambassadors, and I do a lot of outreach. I talk to probably 1 or 2 organizations a week. So that's a lot. That's like maybe 100 different organizations in a year. They repeat, right? Some of them are repeat customers, and we do knowledge sharing, right? benchmarking is a FinOps capability. And so reaching out to what you perceive to be peer organizations and having these conversations around, how much is your cloud spend per revenue? What is your percentage, right? Maybe not in the first meeting, but then, in the first meeting, you can pop that question. And then in the second meeting, they might be able to give you an answer to that. And that is my feeling that 4.5%, it is industry specific, right? So construction will be different from manufacturing, from media, right? There is Gartner surveys that you can subscribe and get, but 4.5% is sort of like a ballpark figure that over the years I have seen repeatedly show up, right? And that is how much you spend on cloud compared to your revenue. Obviously, being less is better, and being higher, you should look at optimizations in the cloud. And Zach here has, how do you feel about overall KPIs such as overall efficiency measure against outstanding recommendations versus spend? Add into it, I actually had a cloud waste percentage by leadership, right? So I calculated I took the actual cost, the net amortized cost of let's say a workload, right? And let's say it was $1,000. And out of that $1,000, there was a recommendation that would have reduced a compute option by $200, right? So now you have the calculation is 800 is the optimized versus 1,000, so you have 20% waste, right? And it is important that this calculation is visible, that people understand how this calculation is done, and that it's done fairly, right? Of course, you could maybe right size multiple times, right? But in the first iteration right size, you get the $200. Maybe in the second iteration, you get another $100, and in the third, you would get 50. But I'm only giving you the first iteration. So it is important to communicate that well, that there is no confusion about what dollar numbers are you using, blended, are you using unblended, are you using net amortized, right? That has to be all communicated well and across the organization. And then you can have these scorecards, right, where by leader. And once you build a scorecard like that, a quick anecdote out of my professional life, the first request that you will have is that leaders will ask you for exceptions, right? They have a workload that maybe runs on Windows. It is a legacy workload. There is some SaaS software running on it. They cannot change this. They have a plan to migrate in 18 months to a different solution, right? But for those 18 months, they want an exception, right? And a simple exception process is that they can request the exception. Someone has to approve it, like the manager has to approve it, and then exceptions need to have a timeout, right? They cannot be forever. And in addition to that, you want another scorecard or a dashboard with just the exceptions, right? So if you're talking to a CFO or to a CTO, you guys can have a conversation about, like, guys, we have $2.5 million here in exceptions, right? And I know that we pledged that we are going to fix those in the next 18 months, but in the interest of making some headway now, could we maybe tackle one or two of those exceptions earlier than later?
That's great insight. And I think Zach is asking here, you did mention sort of by engineering leader a couple of times here and there, asking how you're generally allocating some of this spend to ensure that the right leader knows what their portion of that spend is, what their portion of that wasted spend is, perhaps, what their rates look like.
Exactly. You do it by tag. And in my experience, again, I have been doing this since 2013. Fewer tags is better, right? I consult with other organizations as well, right? There's government organizations that I work with, and they like tags. They have many tags, like department IDs and things like that. However, if a department is being split or absorbed by another department, right, this becomes a problem. So fewer tags is better. At Roku, we only have 2 tags. One is you could say it's a team, and the other one is a project, right? And the project is actually the version of the application running. So it's 1.1, 1.2, right? So you know who the engineer is. You don't only know who the leader is, you know who the engineer is that is responsible for that change. And Michelle says you don't want death by tagging. I agree with that. Zach is saying, in your opinion, what are your favorite tag categories? I only have 2, right? You sort of have a team, and you need sort of like a software stack, right? Because a team could be 2 people, but it could also be 20 people or 200 people, and they work on different versions on the software. So you need to be able to pinpoint the actual engineer that worked on that, not just the director or the VP, right? Because if I go to the VP and say, like, you have a problem, the VP is saying, dude, I have 40 different workloads. Where is the problem, right? That's the first questions that they will ask me.
No, of course. And at Finout, we often see things that untaggable spend, we'll see things like shared cost, right? So the synthetic allocation that we help our customers do really gives them very good line of sight on exactly where that spend is coming from. Because at the end of the day, that's really what FinOps is trying to solve, right? Is the loss of governance when we moved from that capital expenditure that you were describing with the server acquisition to the operational expenses of spinning up new instances that you're essentially renting from AWS or GCP or Azure or OCI, whoever it is that your preferred vendor is. Well, I do know that we have to wrap up. Thank you all so much for all of the great questions in the chat. We really appreciate you, coming here and really diving in with us. Dieter, thank you so much for sharing all of your in-depth expertise on the topic. And Yoav, thank you so much for setting this up. This was great.
My pleasure. Feel free to reach out if you want more sessions, more webinars. We'd love to help the community and support in any way we can. And hopefully we'll see most of you in FinOps in 2 months.
Of course, yeah. I will be there.
Yeah, Dieter. We'll
See you all there.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
We will share the session. Don't worry. We will share it.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.